project, JP and I will create a podcast episode which delves into the significance of Black gospel music in the African American religious experience. In order to broaden our conversation, we have reached out to a third generation minister and gospel practitioner. This minister is a friend from high school of JP's. He's named Kenneth Moales III. He practices at Love Fellowship Tabernacle Church in Atlanta, Georgia. His grandfather, Kenneth Moales Sr., was entered into the Gospel Hall of Fame, and he's a senior graduating from Morehouse College who's attending Harvard Divinity School next fall. He has a great amount of experience with black gospel music and is a black gospel artist as well. With our combined perspectives, we will engage in discussions as to what extent gospel music is integral to African American religions.
The questions we'll be asking in this conversation will be what African American religions, might look like without gospel music. What benefits gospel music brings to the service that can't be replicated without it. We're going to be discussing, you know, the library sources and the materials we've covered in class, such as Singing in My Soul and some of the materials from Kendrick Lamar that we looked at as well. And we're also going to draw from Moles' personal experiences with gospel music, growing up in a family that practices, a deep faith and practices gospel music, and talk about how that shaped his faith and giving him a better understanding of the African American religious experience and how it's unique and how Black gospel music has played an important role in that. Also, in our discussion, we talk a little bit about the state of the Black gospel music industry, how sometimes artists can, change genres, and how Kenny feels about gospel artists moving from the gospel genre to other genres, and how gospel music can sometimes exist outside of the church and sometimes in other venues. So, without further ado, we'll get into the conversation with Ken. And JP Haley here with my classmate Nelly, and we are joined by Kenneth Moales III, a third generation minister at Love Fellowship Tabernacle Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And we are here to discuss the significance of Black gospel music within the African American religious experience. Kenny, would you like to explain why you might be, someone who has experience on this matter, and why we're talking to you?
Yeah. So I've actually grown up in the church. My grandfather was actually the president of the National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses that was started from Thomas A. Dorsey, which is considered the father of gospel music. So legitimately, my grandfather took over that convention. And so I actually grew up around a lot of gospel artists, would see, we'd have a gathering yearly. Of course, not right now with the whole pandemic, but that's kind of literally been my history. So like literally I'm born and raised in gospel music, and kind of have seen and understood kind of the complexity of that realm of music, of that genre of music. So that would say, I would definitely say that's kind of my background, and I think that could assist in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And your current role now, you are a Black gospel music artist, right? You are you have a new record coming out, I believe.
So yeah, I actually am putting a record out in the next couple of weeks. We're doing some post-production work right now. It's called Enter In. It's going to be like almost a Christian gospel record that I'm putting out, that's also going to have some prayer on it as well. So I'm kind of infusing prayer within music. And then also it has 2 original songs on there. So yeah, so I'm an aspiring artist, I guess you could say that. That's about to be putting something out on iTunes and Apple Music and all streaming platforms very soon.
Awesome. So we also so we have readings that we went over in class, some like academic journals that we read about that discuss Black gospel music, and we wanted to kind of ask you about some of those ideas that we were discussing.
Okay, dope.
So Nelly, maybe you want to go first with one of those questions.
Yeah. So one of the questions we came up with was, how important do you think the pioneers of gospel music were, not only to the culture and music, but to the Black population as a whole?
Yeah. I think that even when going back to the civil rights movement, I think that gospel music was a source of hope. The freedom songs, as they call it, we shall overcome. The storm is passing over. A lot of that was a source of hope to the Black society, and most of that music came from a lot of these Baptist churches, a lot of these churches that were on the front line of the civil rights movement. So I think that a lot of the music that comes from the gospel industry, from the Black Christian community, has been very influential in shining a light of hope for the people. And a lot of the music speaks to the situations that we were put in, and really kind of shows us that in spite of where we are, that there is a God. It gives us this theme, this ideology that we serve a God that will bring us out of this, that will help us overcome, that will give us the desires of our heart, and will bring a freedom and liberation um, that we have not yet come into contact with. So I think that that's kind of been like one of the big themes of gospel music, is really hope.
And what would you say makes like a good gospel song, and what would you say that gospel music brings to a religious service when you're there in the church?
Yeah. So I think that gospel music, one of the biggest factors is that it brings in like your soul into it. So there's a very deep rooted feeling, an internal feeling within gospel music that is needed to properly execute certain songs, a lot of songs. Like there has to be a connection to the lyrics. There has to be some type of background that kind of brings you together with that message of song. And I think that a lot of the music that we sing in churches, it resonates with the people during service. So a lot of Black church is built off of music. We're known for the music, for the drums, the organ, the piano, the guitar. Back in the olden days, it was bass drums, tambourines, but like that is one of the central founding factors in the Black church. And that has kind of really, that is something that really carries a lot of these services, is the music. If the music is not there, it can really extremely hinder a service, or the service will not reach a certain climate, or you won't kind of come into that euphoric feeling that you would feel in a day, in an everyday service, if there's not that music, or if the music isn't good. So I think that kind of shows the importance of music in service.
You spoke a little bit about that soul, like that feeling. Like, how would you think? How important do you think that feeling is? Like to Black people as a whole and in the church. You know what I'm saying? How important is it?
Yeah, I think that soul factor is huge. That feeling of chords, hits, the connection of a band and the singers, and then that adding the lyrics on. There's a song called "I Have No Reason to Fear, the Lord Is My Light," by JJ Harrison. Like that song, It's building up, and it's almost has you on the edge. But when you listen to the lyrics, it's just like, okay, it doesn't matter what I face, it doesn't matter what the situation is, it doesn't matter how things are looking. I can't walk in a place of fear because I serve a God who is the light, who will bring me out of the darkness, who will show me the way through the wilderness. And I think that a lot of the songs, it speaks to another part of us that we may not be able to tap into on a normal basis. And I think that we can, even if we're connecting this to kind of the outside world and the soul aspect of it, when we're kind of talking about the secular side of music, we can really look at R&B music. Some of these artists actually come out of that Black church. So legitimately, that upbringing of gospel music and that soul feeling has now been transferred to, okay, I'm not just talking about my connections and relationship to God, but now I'm taking that internal feeling, that soul feeling, and then I'm applying this to love. I'm applying this to my relationship, of how I'm love struck, or how I've been cheated on, or how I've been hurt, how I've been misused, how I've been abused, how I've been misused. So I think that, like, even we kind of see how important that soulful feeling is in music, to the point where that is also being transferred to other genres. And a lot of these popular artists are being noticed and recognized because of that soulful feeling, of that internal connection with the music and the mirroring of the music and the lyrics.
So talking a little bit about how gospel music artists can sometimes, switch genres. I think Sam Cooke was a famous one who did that in the 1950s. He went from being a gospel artist to someone who was releasing, music in like the pop genre. What do you think about gospel artists who, are performing outside of a service and performing, for the radio or at a concert, something that isn't necessarily in a religious environment?
Yeah. I am a believer that the best way we can reach is going outside of the four walls of the church. Um, but traditionally speaking, a lot of a lot of Christians do frown upon that. I personally think that it's needed. Everybody may not be able to fulfill their purpose just staying within the four walls of the church, or just staying within events, and church events or church gatherings and things of that sort. There are some people who need to go to another space. They may need to go to that jazz club. They might need to go to the jazz festival, the pop scene, and really share that gift. So I think that when looking kind of at artists who have sung gospel, I think of it as, hey, when they're going out to the world, they are using the gift that God gave them and sharing it in another space. And really, and there are some people who, I do believe in salvation and people being saved. And I think that, hey, this might be a way where we can reach that lost soul. This might be a way for the church to reach that person who may want to give their life up. And literally, them hearing that song from somebody who was raised in church has now spoke with them, because this gift that God gave them to sing and write has reached them in a way that a preacher may not be able to reach them, or a minister may not be able to reach them. So I feel as though it's very important to expand that, and allow for ministers, allow for singers and praise and worship leaders to really walk in their gift and their calling of music and singing and writing. I have a brother right now, who I was raised with. Like, I legitimately was just like, hey, we have different parents, but at the end of the day, like, there's such a bond there. Like, hey, you're my brother. and he's an artist. He's like on almost like an alternative artist. His name is Shades, Tshadez. And legitimately, like, he sends me all of his music, and I'm just like, yo, I know he writes gospel music as well, but like the vein that he's in is very much outside of the box. And there's a song called like Losing Control. And he literally explains his life, his upbringing, living without a father, and things of that sort, and how there's so much going on with police brutality that he feels as though, he's in a space where he's losing control of his life. And I think that kind of that soul that he brings into that soul aspect that he brings into his music, his secular music, in some way is reaching across the nation, to the point where he was just like, hey, my song popped up. There's people in China listening to it. There's people in Germany listening to it. And I'm just like, hey, there are some people who will stay in the four walls of the church that will never reach those people. So I think that it's important to understand that even though they may not be singing a salvific song that is speaking about God, the nature of God or Christ and his salvific power, like there is still another message that can pull people in.
So speaking about that too, Kendrick Lamar is probably someone that's like who's not speaking that message, but he's still reaching that audience with a good message. So he ended one of his last album or the album before his last with an interview with Tupac, where Tupac's obviously dead. So it arose the question where in the reading it came up, can your dead homies speak through the music? So like the question I have for you is, do you think like that soul that we're talking about, that spirit, do you think it has something to do with our ancestors like living through us and giving us like that inspiration, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that in many ways, the the tribulations, the trials, the trauma that our ancestors went through, has really kind of burst something within that bloodline, to the point where, hey, they may be gone, but there are still songs that they sung, um, that has that that still ring today. And we can even just talk about speeches, even, and apply that to music. There are still speeches that speak to us. So there has to be music that still speaks to us. Like there are a lot of hymns that are sung in the church. Those hymns were written in the 1800s, the 1900s, but a lot of those hymns have been preserved and are still sung today. Um, yeah, so like there are just a lot of songs I can't really think off the top of my head of like a certain hymn or a certain song. But a lot of that music is still being sung today. And I think that it's being repurposed. And I think that is kind of one thing that I love about this new generation, is that a lot of them are repurposing music. They're taking these older hymns, flipping them into a song. And I think that even further speaking, like I do believe that our ancestors speak through us. We can even look at the Bible and how the tribulations that the Israelites went through with the Egyptians still speaks to what we're dealing with today. And that can really much be connected. And there are so many different songs. There are so many different songs that have been literally abstracted from text in the Bible and are literally going across the country. So I think that that's also important to understand, that even looking at the Bible, like that's very like almost like an ancestral piece of work, ancestral piece of literature, divine in its nature as well. But I think that that kind of speaks to what you're saying about the people who have gone on are still speaking through that.
What are your thoughts on how in the early days of gospel music, when it was first becoming mainstream, there would be these gospel artists who would be partnering up with record label companies that were, in charge of, that were run by like white businessmen and businessmen, women. Do you think that gospel music is something that's kind of, she's like uniquely black and it should stay that way, or do you think there is, a room for crossover, or just what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. So I would definitely say that I think that back in that time, I wouldn't say that gospel should be excluded. Because the gospel, the good news, is an inclusive thing. It reaches far beyond race. It reaches far beyond orientation. It reaches beyond the boxes that society creates. And I think that there are a lot of black gospel artists who do have a bad taste in their mouth, from what has been done to some gospel artists way back in the day. So I think there is that whole fear aspect of, hey, I don't want to be taken advantage of. So I want to just create my own lane. That's why there has kind of really been a huge divide between like Christian music and Christian contemporary music and gospel music. There's kind of been like a real big split and divide. But I think that one group that's been really doing well in kind of bringing that interracial aspect to Christian and gospel music would definitely be Maverick City. So like that's a huge group that's legitimately have taken the world by storm. And literally you have people of all races singing to the glory of God and really kind of bringing that old message, taking those Bible verses and recreating it, repurposing it through music and really speaking to the world. Like they just dropped a album actually on yesterday with the church called Elevation Worship. So Elevation Worship is the pastor is Stephen Furtick, and Maverick City is just a fusion of like a bunch of popular praise and worship leaders and worship pastors that just come together and just make songs. So like they did an album called Old Church Basement, and legitimately the whole album is just great. I really enjoyed it, but a lot of it speaks to that older climate of church, and they speak to something. One thing that they say is like one of the lyrics is it's an old hallelujah with a new melody. So literally saying like, hey, we are still pulling things from the old generation, but we're just repurposing that. But I do think to go back to that question, I do think that it's good and I don't think it should be frowned upon for black and whites to integrate in music. And I believe in unity. I believe in love. And I think that music is a way to bring us all together.
So, follow up kind of to that. If a black gospel writer or musician were to go like superstar status, do you think they're able to maintain like that connection to themselves in the black community, or you think like the industry's going to get a hold of them and kind of like misconstrue the message a little bit?
I definitely do believe that I've seen a lot of artists. I've grown up in kind of seen a lot of artists who have blown up, who are, top stars. But I think that it all depends on your intention behind it. And your reason why you did this. If there's somebody who just wrote music because they just wanted to get rich, like of course they're most likely going to just leave their community and just kind of do them. But there are a lot of artists who have blown up, who are millionaires, who are making 6 and 7 figures, and still are very much so grounded in their community, grounded in in social justice, and I think that that's kind of been a huge thing. I've seen like a lot of concerts lately of like black artists who are in the church, who have been, doing, raising awareness, for police brutality, for social justice, for equality. And I think that realistically they are able to even reach and impact more people when they reach that superstar status. And I think they're able to do more. And I think that the only people who kind of go astray are the people who never cared about the community in the first place. And that's how I would go about that.
I guess to kind of wrap things up a little bit here, where would you see, the state of like Black America today, and then Black gospel music and its role in religious music today? Do you think it's in it, as good as it's ever been? Maybe a little past its heyday, or where do you see Black gospel
Okay,
music in the
I
community?
will say it isn't as good as it's ever been. Speaking to the Black, you said Black community and Black music, or Black church and Black music?
I'm not sure. Let's.
The state of Black America too.
Okay, state of Black America. Okay, so I would say when looking at Black America, I think that we are in a place where we are very much unified. For the most part, we are all speaking the same language. We're all speaking equality. We're all speaking the need for rights. We are all speaking that there has to be a change that must occur. There has to be a systemic change that must occur, that combats oppression, that combats bigotry, that combats racism. And I think that that's where really Black America is. But I think that Black America has reached their boiling point. And I keep going back to like police brutality, because that's kind of been our whole thing this whole last, not just last year, but these last couple of years. That's kind of been at the forefront of people's minds. I think at the verge, like it began to rise again with Trayvon Martin. That was kind of like the one of the first things that really sparked Black America in a rage. And I think that from then on, from then to George Floyd, to even the young lady who was just killed last week, like I think that Black America was like, okay, there's something has to change. And I think that if the US understood kind of the perspective, looked at the ecological factors and the background of these Black communities and what they're really facing and what they're going through, they'll understand kind of how like one wrong decision can literally burn this whole country down. And I think that that's kind of like, I think America is like on the edge of their seats, like they're on thin ice. And I think that, some people were speaking about the Chauvin trial and how him being convicted was justice. And a lot of people were like, no, that wasn't justice. That was just the system holding him accountable for what really happened. Justice would have been him going to jail and George Floyd surviving to tell the testimony. And so I think that, losing lives and a repercussion of you taking a life isn't justice. It's just karma. It's just, hey, you give what you get. What you did, you're gonna reap you're gonna reap what you sowed. And I think that that's where Black America is. Like they're like, hey, something has to turn, something has to happen, and hopefully, something can change, something can shift with the current administration. And I think that when looking at Black music, Black gospel music, I think that it's like stronger than ever. I think that it's stronger than ever. I'm really infused in the music, the gospel music industry, like legitimately every Friday. I'm going up on Apple Music. I'm going on iTunes to figure out, okay, what new album came out. And really just, that's really like all I listen to almost. My brother really tries to diversify me and, send me a lot of these other artists that he listens to. But I will say that like it's really been growing, it's really been developing, and I think that gospel music is becoming more expansive. And I think that the last part is gospel artists are beginning to actually do it on their own. And they're really taking initiative to be like, hey, yes, I'm writing this music, but I also own this music. There's no record company that owns my rights. I did this on my own. And I think that kind of that whole possession of owning, like, this is mine, this is my work. You aren't, you're not forfeiting, you're not profiting off of this, as is kind of been that big wave. And I just think that that's been in the music industry as in general. Like, there are a lot more independent artists like, no, I'm not going through a label, I'm doing this on my own. And I think that that's kind of been like that whole swing that the gospel industry has been in right now.
Do you think when a gospel musician makes a lot of money, do you feel that they have an obligation to give back to the community and to the church? Or,
I think that they should also always honor where they come from, honor your culture, honor the people who gave you the chance. A lot of the musicians growing up, yes, they're on these huge stages, but it's because like that storefront, that small church gave you a chance, when another drummer ran off, and they let you come to the church, practice, play all their services. They even, would give you money for playing and things of that sort. So I think that it would just be a disservice and like almost disrespect or dishonorable to kind of forget where you came from, who really helped you along the way. And I think that, again, it speaks to like, hey, if you don't honor where you came from, you didn't respect it in the first place. But I think that some of the most integral musicians are people who recognize, hey, I won't be anything without, playing in these churches. A lot of the stuff I'm playing at these concerts is stuff I learned from people I looked up to, or from working with musicians, from stuff that I did during service. So I think that that whole aspect, when looking at it, yeah, I think that there's a need for people to always go back home, to always go back to your roots and sow into those people. You may not go back to the church and play, but at least go and do a seminar and help some musicians. Go do a shed session and really help those younger guys who want to be like you, who are aspiring to be big, aspiring to blow up. Make sure that you're planting seeds in them, to so that when it's when you're when you may no longer be relevant, they're like, and they make it and they're on the main stage, they give that same respect to you. And I think that that kind of creating and perpetuating that cycle is kind of the thing that we need.
I got one more question for you too.
Yeah.
If you could learn and be around one musician, dead or alive, like who would it be? Just one.
One musician. That's hard. That's really difficult. There are so many musicians. Oh, I would hang around. There's a man living. His name is Stanley Brown, out of the New York area. He has been one of the biggest names in the gospel music. If you ask gospel artists, do you know Stanley Brown? They know him. He's played for so many different artists. He's produced plenty of records. He's played for huge names. I don't know if you know Sunday's the big show, Sunday's Best, that kind of like, it's like a show for aspiring gospel artists. Like, Stanley Brown was the first guy to start the band. He was over the band, but legitimately he got to a place where he blew up so much that he was the guy calling calling other people to be like, hey, I'm putting you on this show. So I think that, that's somebody, going back to the last question, where like, that is somebody who legitimately has grown up in church, has made it in the industry, that's making all types of money, that has all types of connections, who even to this day, I think he's in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, who's literally now going and reaching back to these 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, giving them the gems to be successful, giving them those calls of those life-changing events and those gigs. And I think that that's kind of like someone who like I would look up to in the music industry, because it's just like, hey, I've made it, I've done it, but hey, I want to see these other young cats succeed. And I think that would be like one of the guys, Stanley Brown.
All right. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This is, really an amazing conversation, and really lucky to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Man, I'm just honored to get that message from you, asking you to help out with this project, bro. I understand senior year. Yeah. And you got to get that senior thesis, that last project, and so I'm glad I could be of service to assist in that.
Yeah,
appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, no problem, bro. Much love to you all.
You too.
All right, thank you, Kenny.
All right, I'll catch up with you all.
All right.
All right, we just finished up talking to Kenny Moales, had that conversation about Black gospel music and the African American religious experience. Nelly, how do you think it went?
I think it went really well. He had a lot of great insights. He was very well spoken. He had a lot of good information for us, and he was very well prepared, it seemed like, for the interview, even though he didn't know the questions. So I think it went really well.
Yeah, he definitely had a lot to say. He's a very interesting guy. I didn't realize that his grandfather actually took over that like gospel music like committee right after John Dorsey, who's like I read about him in our readings. So that's kind of crazy to have that like personal connection to someone who is reading about our history books literally.
Right. Small world.
Yeah, actually. And he seemed to have a lot to say about the gospel music industry and how these artists are like getting bigger and bigger and starting to like produce music on their own, which seems to be pretty important to him, being able to own your own music.
Right. Yeah, I found it interesting as well. Just the fact that people are starting to take it into their own hands, their destiny. So people no longer want to depend on just anybody just to steer them in the right direction. So I think it's an important step in Black America. People are going to have to start doing this, not only just in gospel music, but in sports and in every lane of life. People need to start taking ownership of their own things too. So I thought that was very important.
And we saw in our readings that there were in gospel music, there's sometimes a pushback against making money off of it or doing it outside the church, and he mentioned that, but he was seen to be representative of like this new guard of gospel musicians who are just for spreading the message like above anything else. So whether that means going on iTunes or Spotify or something like that, he seems to be all for that, because it helps spread the message, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I do too. I think the more people that you can touch with your message, like he was saying, the more people that hear the message, the more ways that you can receive a message. I think it's just going to make it more people will be more likely to receive it better yet. So.
And then as for gospel music being like significant to the actual like church service and experience, it seemed like in his mind he couldn't even like imagine a service without the gospel music, because he had a lot to say about like that soul or that like rhythm and that like feeling you get when you're in the service with the music.
Yeah, man, I think that soul feeling is an important feeling for Black people to deal with, just because like he was talking about the trauma, the things that our ancestors had to deal with. That spirit is still alive. So in every aspect of our lives, whether it's music, whether it's schooling, whatever it is, that soul always feels connected. as Black people. So I think that was very important for him to talk about that.
Yeah. So all in all, I feel like it was a very productive conversation, and it was really interesting to be able to see the stuff in our that we're learning in class be kind of like exemplified like through Kenny and the stuff he's doing today with gospel music.